welcome to Making Sense of Multiple Sclerosis with me, Shirley, and today I'm going to be talking about bowels, poop, and all of that good stuff. So, I don't know if you've noticed, but no matter where we are in life, poo is taboo. Why is that? Every being on the planet does it. So why are we so worried about it? Well, in MS, it's less than ideal when you're out in public, catching a bus, at a dinner with a friend, and you crap your pants. Unfortunately, that is a real life narrative for many people with MS. And what I want to tell you is, don't be embarrassed about it. Easier said than done. We're not all as shameless as me. But there are options, and there are several options. And sometimes you're not informed about all of them. So today I want to go through some different things to look at, and I'll post links below from the MS Society, MS Trust, NHS, whatever I have referred to, I'll post below so that you can look at it yourself. There are a lot of options out there, so please don't despair. And please remember, poo is not taboo. So why do so many of us MSers have such an issue with bowels and bladders, usually collectively, but sometimes more so one than the other? Why is that? Well, if you look at the video I did on bladder issues, you'll see that there is a certain area within the spinal cord, and I'm leaning this way because I'm going to try and put it up here again really quickly, just to show you that it does tend to be in the sacral area of the spinal cord that many of these issues are stemming from. So sensations, genital function, sexual function, bladder, bowel, it all comes from that area. Typically, not always. I mean, there may be other areas that have caused that, but that's typically where, if there are lesions or areas of damage with your MS, you know, in that area, it tends to stem from that. Again, that causes a lot of issues in your brain. You're getting the message to your bowels about sensation, i.e. you need to go to the toilet, or, you know, maybe feeling nothing, and then something happens and you have an accident. So it's really difficult, and getting bowels sorted out is difficult. It's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of trying different things until you get the routine that you need, perhaps the medication that you need, and kind of go from there. So there are a number of factors aside from or on top of the damage that you have through lesions and areas of inflammation that have an impact on gut and bowel motility. Obviously, in MS, the colon muscles can become really weak and sluggish, so that really takes a while longer for the gut to process what's going on and get rid of it in a way that it would have pre-MS or without MS, and it can take a lot longer. So a lot of people with MS sometimes find their gut is really bloated and really uncomfortable. And obviously, a lot of the times with MS, our mobility can be impacted significantly. And then if that's the case, we're not able to move around like we normally would, and we're not able to exercise like we normally would. So that again impacts the motility within the bowel. So less exercise, bowels not moving, muscle issues, colon issues, all of that melted together, it can be quite an awful experience, and it can be quite upsetting. It really is upsetting. So anyway, everybody's different. Prior to MS, we would maybe go once a day, 2-3 times a day tops, every second day, every third day. That will change from pre-MS to having MS, and it will also change as MS progresses, if it does. So that's something to bear in mind. So the way I would break this down to try and help from my own experience would be to break it down into little sections. And the sections that I would like to break it down into is what you do, what you eat, and what you take. And these factors are what have a lot to do and a big impact on how your bowels function. So let's look at that. So there really are typically two categories with bowels and MS, and you fall into one of them, I'm sure. You may actually go between one and the other until you get medication and diet and exercise and things worked out. But typically you fall into one of two categories. Either you can't empty your bowels, or you have no control and they leak involuntarily. So you're going to fall into one of these, and sometimes you're both, but tends to be one or the other. The majority of those that I speak to tend not to be able to go, but it can happen both ways. So let's look at them both individually. First one, what to do when you can't empty your bowels. So the first one, what you do. So what do you do? What's your daily routine? How active are you? Do you exercise? Do you move around a lot? How does that work out? How often are you eating? All of those things are part of what you do. The second thing is diet. What do you eat? The second thing is, what do you eat? Do you eat fibre? Foods containing fibre? Do you eat a lot of foods that help with gut motility? Are you drinking a lot, especially water? Not alcohol, although that's probably preferable for many of us when we're at our wit's end. So how much water we're drinking, how much fibre we're intaking, that's a big part in being able to avoid constipation and empty our bowels. Have we explored drugs? There are many drugs out there that can really help with constipation, and they're typically split into two categories. I want to explain these two categories because they work in different ways and they help in different ways. And I think if you understand how they work, then you know when you go to the pharmacy or your neurologist or whoever, you can explain what the issue is, and it makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference to know the difference between the two drugs. It can also help you avoid accidents when you are able to go. So with drugs in constipation, they're typically put into two categories. So you've got osmotic laxatives and then you have stimulant laxatives. Now they work differently for different reasons. Some of the osmotic kind of laxatives would be things like lactulose, like Cido, Movicol. These are kind of some of the brands that you maybe see in the shop. And they sometimes fall under different brands. It just depends on the company selling them. And they kind of work in a way to pull water from elsewhere in the body into the bowels. And that can take 2 to 3 days to actually work. And they pull that water in to stop stools from being dry and hard and uncomfortable to pass. The second one is a stimulant laxative. And those ones tend to be Senna, Bisacodyl is another one that falls under a lot of names as well, but Senna and Bisacodyl tend to be the kind of first line stimulant laxatives that would be prescribed or that you can get over the counter. They tend to work a bit quicker, usually sort of within 6 to 12 hours. A lot of them you'll take at night time. You wake up in the morning and in theory you should be able to have a bowel movement. It doesn't always happen that way, and it depends on if you have any impaction or how long that constipation has been literally building up. So that's another factor, and it's something to think about. There are also suppositories, which you sometimes find will be administered, or you can administer yourself. I remember during my many weeks in hospital having to have them because I had no sensation from the chest down, completely paralysed. So I had to have that because I couldn't go and I didn't know that I was going, and if I did, then I didn't know to tell anyone. So you know, that suppositories are good, and they typically work within 10 to 45 minutes, so they're really quite quick. So that's another option. Not always the kind of the cleanest and the easiest or convenient when it comes to being at home and then having to go out and about, but if you can plan well, you can use a suppository as well. You also get something called transanal irrigation. Lovely term. And that is essentially a mini enema to try and get hot soapy water in there or warm soapy water and give yourself a clear out, and there's special equipment that you can look into getting to do that. I always remember a lady sitting next to me in a hospital one time, and she was in the bed next to me, and she was another neurological patient. It wasn't MS, but the majority of the patients in the neurology ward were all on some sort of laxative because many of us struggle with that. And she said, well, it depends what they give you, love. And I said, well, you know, how can you know what to take? I was all new to this. And she said to me, well, there's a saying in the neurology wards, and it said that senna softens. I thought a little bit of alliteration there, I can remember that, senna softens, but laxido is a torpedo. And I just thought, I'll never forget that. And again, it just kind of shows you the difference between these osmotic and stimulant laxatives and how they work. So I thought that was maybe a good way to remember it. Another thing that you can do is kind of a second line thing after trying to look at diet and, you know, routine, what you do, what you eat, all of those things. After transanal irrigation, is biofeedback, and that's not readily available everywhere, but it is something that's available in certain areas, so it's something worth looking into, where they put a sensor into you and they leave that sensor in there, and then when you're trying to have a bowel movement, you can look at the screen and be able to assess, are you able to, you know, contract, and are you able to use these muscles within the colon? Are you able to relax them? When you do tense them, how intense is it? You get a good measure of how these muscles are operating on a little screen. It tells you that biofeedback. It lets you know biologically how you're operating, where these deficits are, and where you're functioning well. And that can sometimes help you to evaluate things better and get a bit of a clearer picture of what's going on when you're trying to go to the toilet and pass, you know, a bowel movement. So that's an option as well. So if you're in the other group, the second category, and that's when you empty, and it might be involuntarily, you have no control, and then you just have an accident somewhere, and that is obviously really embarrassing and really difficult to deal with, but there are options for that too. So again, we go back to the first line of the first category and we look at what you do, what you eat, and also in terms of drugs. We're limited on that side, but I'll get to that. So we're going to look at what you do. What do you do throughout the day? Again, what is your routine? How active are you? Are you exercising? If you can't exercise, when you do move, how are you moving? And then we go to what you eat. So are you eating things that are perhaps overly fibrous? Are you eating things that are perhaps too rich? Is there an allergy? Because not everything that we have symptom-wise is MS. Sometimes there are other ailments and things going on, and we get ill from other things just like anyone else does. So is there something else? Do we have an allergy or an intolerance that we need to look at? And that's really important as well. The other side of that is that if we have muscle tone issues, and if we have, whether it's almost an internal spasticity where the muscles are just moving too quickly and the messages and signals are not getting to the bowel properly, and we're pushing through food too quickly, sometimes that's what causes it. And it doesn't matter how you change your diet or what you do, that's just going to be a part of your MS, in which case then we need to look at food and what we're eating to help bulk up a little bit and to help stop that from happening quite as quickly, and also to look at the routine throughout the day. When do you feel that you're more likely to have a bowel movement? When have been the typical times of day that you have had an accident? Maybe there aren't, maybe it's just completely sporadic, and that happens too. But these are the things that we have to assess and make a record of in order to be able to try and formulate some kind of intervention. In terms of drugs, there aren't a lot of drugs for that. You do get your typical Imodium, loperamide. Any of these type of drugs are over the counter, but again, all of these things I'm telling you are always better to run by a GP. I'm not a medical professional, so these are the kind of things that I've personally experienced. and I'm aware of. So it's worth talking to a GP or a medical professional about what other drugs are available that would kind of slow down that motility and give your gut time to process things, and also give you a chance to get into a routine to be able to empty your bowels without things being a shock. And it can be a shock. It's particularly inconvenient if you're in the queue at the supermarket, or if you're weeding in the front garden and things happen.
You have got to be kidding.
And children are scarred for life. Now, believe it or not, and I kind of, when my MS nurse told me, I kind of laughed inappropriately, which I do anytime there's something about poo, and some people get really defensive about that, but I've always laughed about poo, and I'll never stop laughing about poo, so don't take it like I'm, immature, even though I am. You do get plugs, and I was like, plugs? And she was like, oh yeah, it's kind of like, if you like an anal tampon, you put that tampon in, but it's a plug, and obviously it kind of mushrooms into a shape that protects you from leakage, or if you're going to some sort of social function or something where you really don't want to have an accident, you never do, but a particular thing, then that's an option to kind of get you through it with a bit more confidence. And that was comforting to me at one point to know, because I was like that. I was the second category when I first got diagnosed because I couldn't control anything, and now I'm kind of in the first category where I have to try and watch diet and all these things. So but that is an option, and it is out there. It's something I would go through an MS nurse or a neurologist or someone to explain how that works and how to do that properly, because that's obviously a very, intimate procedure, and you don't want to get that wrong. So the next thing would be the second line. If none of these things are kind of helping, the second line of interventions would be to look at pelvic floor muscles. And I remember being told about that by someone, and I thought, well, I don't have any right now, so that's of no good to me. But if you do have the sensation there to be able to work on the pelvic floor muscles, then that's worth doing. And there's loads of, if you look on YouTube for loads of pelvic floor exercises, and even the NHS website, tons of stuff on there to show you how to do pelvic floor. So that would probably be helpful, because at the end of the day, it is a muscle, and that sphincter muscle within passage, you need to work on that. So that's something to think about. Bit concerned about this gesture, but I'm sure you got the picture. And the other thing is the transanal irrigation as well, kind of like a mini enema. You can do that to periodically clear yourself out before you're going somewhere, so you know that there's nothing there that might pop out without warning. So that's good as well. That's something to think about. Biofeedback that we talked about in the first category, that's also available for people who have that leak and involuntary emptying, and that can tell you about where the muscles are lacking and where the issues are specifically within that area. There are options for surgery, and I noticed some things before I came on here. I was looking at surgical interventions, and I wasn't entirely convinced, so I'm not even going to discuss that because I'm not sure and I'm not the authority on it, but I know there are surgical interventions that are available. So who do you go to when you're having these issues? That's the next thing. Who is available to talk about these things? There's a variety of different places you can go, depending on where you are and what country you're in. In Britain, particularly Scotland, our National Health Service, or NHS, we have a continence service in most counties, so you can go to that particular area, and I think anybody can self-refer. Certainly in my county you can, but you can self-refer to most continence services. MS nurse is someone that is absolutely fundamental to the support of someone with multiple sclerosis. And if you don't have an MS nurse, then not only do I feel really sad for you, it's something that has really helped me. And again, it's a personality thing. You might have one and you just don't get along, but for the most part, I've found them to be absolutely fundamental. Mine is an angel. Also your GP, and again, GP, general practitioner, they kind of have to practice a wide variety of we have to practice a wide variety of interventions, and not all of it is specialised. So when it comes to multiple sclerosis, they don't always know the ins and outs like the neuro or the MS nurse does, but the GP can certainly point you in the right direction, signpost you or refer you to something, whether it's you know, medication or services. Also your neurologist. That's something that he may be able to signpost for you or tell you what is available, particularly within your area. A gastroenterologist as well, because that's going to deal with a lot of the issues, you know, leading on to bowel issues. And your district nurse, if you have district nurse or area nurses. There's a wealth of people that you can go to, and I think that you need to know who they are. I'm going to post as much as I can in the links below, if I can get rid of my dog. And you can have a look at your own leisure and see if any of those things are helpful. And I really do hope that it helps you. I think the biggest thing for me is to make sure that other people don't feel alienated or ostracised or embarrassed. It is an embarrassing thing when it comes down to it. If you have an accident, it is embarrassing. But it's life, and it's life with MS. And the way that I conquer it, the way that I get around it, is to be indifferent, because at the end of the day, a bit of comic relief and being able to have a laugh at your own expense sometimes is the best way to cope with it, and is the only way for you to put 2 fingers up to MS. So I want you to know you're not alone, and I want you to know that you are not isolated. There's so many people all over this world that are going through what you're going through, and you're not alone. So again, I apologise for dogs and children and things coming in and out, but I'm a mum and a partner and an animal owner, and that always goes on in the background. So yeah, I hope this helps somebody, and don't be alone. And just remember, poo is not taboo.